my tutorials on Webpack. So this will be a playlist of a lot of tutorials. I'll guide you through a comprehensive understanding of Webpack by the end of these tutorials. In this particular video, I will give an introduction to Webpack, and then as we move forward, I'll go through all the guides on Webpack. We will build some things. We will do a demonstration of how a particular Webpack is built and so on and so forth. But today I'll start by discussing what Webpack is and maybe discuss the basic concepts behind Webpack. So what is Webpack? Webpack is basically this tool that takes your dependency graph. Imagine you have say 10 files in your project and you want to serve it to the front end. Now what happens is when you are serving 10 files, 10 different requests have to go to your backend and come back from your backend. So 10 requests will go to your, just give me 1 second. Ten requests will go from your front end and they will go to backend, and then 10 files have to retrieve from backend. Instead, what we can do is we can combine that dependency graph that you see here into very few files, one JS file, one CSS file, few PNG and JPG files. And then what happens is there's only one file that has to be retrieved or very few files that have to be retrieved from the backend. And that saves a lot of back and forth between client and the server. And that's where Webpack comes into picture. It combines a lot of files into very few files. That's the basic idea behind Webpack. So you write your code like this. Let me make this bigger. Um, so you write your code like this. Let's say you have an import from bar.js and you have bar.js which contains some data. You can bundle it into a single file uh, where that bundle will contain both the index.js and bar.js. Both of them combine into a single file, and then what you do is you give the entry point to your directory, and then all the files that are linked to that entry point will be stored in a single bundle.js, and a single file which is called as page.html will go, and this page.html will import bundle.js. So when we run Webpack command, we run Webpack command to create the bundle.js. So a single bundle will be created and that will be signed with HTML page. Think of it like packaging. You have a lot of small items. Let's say you have a lot of assorted cookies. Let's say you have 10 cookies or 20 cookies of different taste and different flavors. You can combine them into a single box and then you can send that box via mail. Similar thing happens here also. A lot of different small files are combined into a large file, and that single file is sent across. I want to go to the documentation and talk about the concepts. There are These are the main concepts here: entry, output, loaders and plugins. If you understand these four, mode and browser compatibility you don't worry about, but if you understand these four concepts, you are pretty much you are half, I mean 80% of your use cases will be taken care of at that point. If you just understand what is entry, what is output, what is loaders and what is plugins. But as we go along in these tutorials, you will learn more details about how to work with Webpack. So let's look at entry. So this document is overview of these concepts. Okay, so here is the entry point. What is entry point? The entry point indicates which module Webpack should use to begin building out its internal dependency graph. So first of all, this is something you need to know. Building out its internal dependency graph. So what happens is, as soon as you say, hey, hey Webpack, we need to build a single file, Webpack will ask, where should I start? What is the entry point for your um, application? There can be multiple entry points. It's not just like you can have a single entry point, but Webpack will figure out other modules and library that entry point depends on directly or indirectly. So all the dependency graph, starting from the entry point to the dependency, it depends on to the dependency, those dependency depend on, and so on and so forth. The whole application will be like a graph, and you are going to, I'll go back to this Webpack. So imagine this is your entry point here. This is your entry point, and this depends on this file. This file depends on these two files, and these two files further depends on these files. So you just give it the initial file, and once you give the initial file, it will figure out the whole graph on its own. Let's go back to the documentation. So that's how it builds the internal dependency graph. By default, its value is source.index, but you can specify different or multiple entry points by setting. This is important. Multiple is important. Here, this word is important. Multiple entry points by setting up the entry property in the Webpack configuration. Okay. So you can learn more about entry point. That's not important. There's something called output property. So first is the entry point, second is the output. The output property tells Webpack where to emit the bundles it creates and how to name these files. So this is important. Emit and how to name, and probably bundle also. So emit bundles and how to name them. You start with, you give the path to the bundle. By default, uh, it defaults to dist slash main.js for the main output file, and dist folder for other generated files. You can configure this part of the process by specifying output field in your configuration. If you don't specify anything, it will create a dist folder in your directory, in your repository, and there will be a file called as main.js inside it, and other files will be saved in dist itself. In the above example, output.filename and output.path, these two things, output.filename and output.path, property tells the Webpack name of our bundle and where we want it to be emitted to. So where the bundle should be emitted and what should be the name of it. Okay. Then there are loaders. So we have, so what's the difference between input and output? Entry and output. Entry tells you where you have to start creating, and output tells you where you have to output it. If I go back to the graph here, you have to tell me the initial position or the source of this graph, and tell me where the assets will be saved. If you tell me the input and output, I will be able to, I as in I am the Webpack, I will be able to create the files for you in the output folder. Let's move forward. So now we have loaders. Out of the box, Webpack only understands JavaScript and JSON files. So you just give, so out of the box you can only deal with JavaScript and JSON. Loaders allow Webpack to process other file types. So you can pretty much create all types of, you can pretty much create all types of files, all you can pretty much bundle all types of files, but you have to create loaders for them. There are two properties at a high level. Loaders have two properties in Webpack configuration: test and use. Test property identifies which file or files would be transformed, and use property indicates which loader should be used to do the transformation. So let's look at this one. Suppose I want to transform the text files. Suppose I want to transform the text files. Now Webpack only allows you to transform JSON or JavaScript files. So when a text file comes, it will throw an error. It will say I don't understand this file, or it will try to transform it using the logic of using the logic of JavaScript. But what you do here is you specify, okay, whenever you see a extension of type text, and mind it, this is not inside inside a quote. It's not quoted, it's unquoted. So you just give a regex any file type of any file of type text. You use a raw loader for it. There are multiple loaders with this. Let me show you the loaders. Okay, loaders. So there are files, var loader, ref loader, JSON loader, transpilers, Babel loader, coffee loader. There are all types of loaders, CSS, less, SES, view loader, also, and there are multiple loaders available with this, uh, available with Webpack. So loader will basically take a particular file type and convert it into your assets. The output is called as assets. The configuration above has defined a rules property for a single module with two required properties, test and use. This tells Webpack compiler the following. Hey Webpack compiler, when you come across a path that resolves to .text file inside of a require import statement. So whenever you see a require import statement and the file type is text, use the raw loader to transform it before you add it to the bundle. So first transform the file, and then before you add the file to the bundle, transform it using the loader. So that is the loader. Let's look at plugins as well. While loaders are used to transform certain types of modules, plugin can be leveraged to perform a wide range of tasks like bundle optimization, asset management, induction of environment variables. So you can extend, plugins are going to extend the properties of Webpack. Uh, you can do multiple things with them. In order to use plugin, you need to require it and add it to plugin array. So require the plugin in the config file, and config file is a JSON file, so you can use require here, and then you can say you can create the plugin, and you have to use most plugins are customizable through options. Since you can use plugin multiple times in a configuration for different purposes, you need to create an instance of it by calling it. Okay, create an instance. So that these are the steps of using a plugin. Uh, Require it and add it to plugin array, and then finally create an instance. So while adding to the plugin, you have to create an instance of it. In the example above, HTML Webpack plugin generates an HTML file for your application and automatically injects all generated plugins into this file. So this plugin is going to create a HTML file just like this file. If you go back to this file here, this file that you say page.html will be created by that plugin. Okay, so that's plugin. They just extends the properties. And mode, you can define whether you are in production, development, or none. You can enable built-in optimization that correspond to each environment. Uh, so so you can use different modes. I mean, so there are different requirements when you are developing a software and when you are pushing it for production. And to have those different requirements taken care of separately, you have the mode property in Webpack. Browser compatibility, Webpack supports all browsers, ES5 compliance. If you want to support older browsers, you will need to load a poly file before using these expressions. So for all the latest browsers, it will work well. Okay, and environment is you want node 10 10 plus 10.13 plus point 0 plus. So if you look at current node version, currently Node is at 2023, so it's very old. So version 10 is way old. You can work with Webpack pretty much always. So that's the key detail of uh, Webpack. We understand there are four basic concepts: entry, output, loader, and plugin. The difference between entry and output is entry decides where the file inputs, and output decides what are the assets and where you will save the assets. Loaders are loaders are the things that uh, decide specific file types. Like by out of the box, Webpack will only deal with JSON and JavaScript. But if you decide that you want to use other files like text files or CSS files, you have to create loaders for them. And then finally, plugins extend the functionality of Webpack. For example, it can do optimization, it can do asset management, it can do a lot of things other than the basic out of the box functionality of Webpack. So the difference between loader and plugin should also be clear. Loaders are for the things that for the files that Webpack cannot bundle. You need to transform some files before they can be bundled, and that is where loaders companies come into picture. And plugins are to extend functionality. So both loaders and plugins add to what Webpack can do out of the box, but the difference is loaders are specifically for for transforming files from different from of different types, and for transforming files of different types, and plugins are there for all different functionalities that are outside all the functionalities that you can extend. I can show you some plugins as well. uh, what happened? So plugins, no plugins. So there is banner plugin. Add a banner to the top of each generated chunk. There's HTML plugin. There is DLL plugin. Splits bundle in order to drastically improve build time. So on and so forth. There are a lot of plugins, and so that's the plugin part of. So that covers all the basic concepts related to Webpack. In the next coming videos, we'll do multiple. We'll go through the guides and we'll do multiple different things with the guides as we go along. So I want to go through all the guides and do hands-on coding for Webpack. And once we are done with the guides, I also want to do one more thing. I want to build a smaller version of Webpack uh, using basic manual work. So I'll take a repository and convert it into bundle manually, so that I can show you how Webpack works inside. Also, I want to do a few things. I want to create some plugins, some custom plugins, some custom loaders as we go along in this journey. By the end of this journey, you and I both will be absolutely comprehensively pro at Webpack. See you in other video. Thank you.